Most Australians would support efforts to help Taiwan if China attacked the country, a new poll finds. It's graduation day at Taiwan's military academies. We look at how Taiwan's Air Force is dealing with a growing pilot shortage. Taiwan's opposition parties are protesting the government's picks for new justices to the country's constitutional court. Plus, more than 180 countries are celebrating International Yoga Day, and Taiwan has also joined in. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Leslie Liao. Australians would support efforts to help Taiwan if China attacked the country. That's according to a survey released on Wednesday. The poll by the Sydney-based Lowy Institute found 80% of Australians support accepting Taiwanese refugees. A majority also backed imposing diplomatic and economic sanctions on China, sending arms and military supplies to Taiwan, and using the Australian Navy to help stop a blockade. But the poll found Australians would not support sending troops. To tease out some of the details from the poll, our reporter Stash Butler spoke with Ryan Neelam from the Lowy Institute in Sydney.
Taiwan was listed in your poll as Australians' sort of second biggest concern. How do you explain that?
It's interesting when you look at the trend of this particular statistic. Only 3 years ago, 35% of people saw conflict over Taiwan as a critical threat to Australia's interests. Today, that figure is 65%. So it's almost doubled in the space of 3 years. And I think that reflects that people are paying attention to the rising tensions in the region.
In your poll, results show there's a bit of a tightening, a bit of a move towards more people seeing China as an economic partner versus a security threat. I mean, still more see China as a security threat than an economic partner, but there's been a narrowing there. I mean, how do you explain that?
That reflects, I think, in part, that over the last year, since the election of the Albanese government in Australia, that relations have started to thaw between Beijing and Canberra, and Australians conscious of that. We've seen glimmers of easing with some products, some trade blockages have eased, and others there's signs of potential progress. It's certainly not a whole-scale opening up, but there seems to be movement at the station, and I think that's in part what this result reflects.
How much of what we're seeing in terms of government policy and public opinion, which one is leading the other here? Are warming ties leading to kind of warming perceptions of China, or towards Taiwan, for example, or do you think it's the government being led by people's views on and fears perhaps about a conflict over Taiwan?
That's a great question, Sat. And I think actually there's always a bit of both in this. It's not a clear cut one or the other, but we do see what we have seen, I think, is that public opinion tends to follow and be shaped by the environment around it. And part of that is what politicians on both sides say, how the relationship has played out, and what's happening in terms of how China is acting in the region towards its partners and certainly it within its own borders as well.
That was Ryan Neelam from the Lowy Institute speaking with our reporter Stash Butler. Taiwan's armed forces are celebrating the graduation of almost 2,000 officers. All three branches are welcoming new soldiers into service. But it comes as Taiwan is dealing with a shortage of pilots needed to defend the country. Jaime Okan reports.
It's graduation day. These 2,000 cadets are now officers in Taiwan's Army, Navy, and Air Force. They've taken their oaths and are ready to serve the country. Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen congratulated the men and women in uniform with a reminder to stay steadfast in the face of aggression.
刚刚我替几位毕业生代表授予军阶，这枚军阶代表的各位准备迈向军人志业的起点，同时肩负起保家卫国、守护人民的重责大任。
Shen Jiaxiang is one of the graduates from the Air Force. He's completed a rigorous training program from the U.S. military. He graduated at the top of his class and is eager to put what he's learned into practice.
在美国习得各项不同的组织架构，然后教育方式以及军事训练的模式都与台湾大庭相径。那我希望可以从美国所学的这个部分去无存菁，融合进国军的现有体制内，让国军的战力更上层次。
He also hopes he'll be in the cockpit of Taiwan's most advanced fighter jet.
目前的梦想是飞行 F-16。
Taiwan is due to add 66 of the warplanes to its fleet from the U.S. over the next few years. This new hardware, combined with pressure to replace retiring pilots, could make his dream an immediate reality. The military has been trying to recruit more soldiers like Shen, but with little success. With fewer young people interested in joining the military and a low birth rate, Taiwan is scrambling to find enough pilots for its fighter jets.
我们这个新飞行员的要能够招募，其实是非常的困难，因为刚刚有提到，在2011年到2019年，国防部在将近10年的时间内，也只不过替我们 F-16机队新增加21个人，用10年时间只加21个人。
China's increased military pressure is putting a strain on the country's limited resources. Taiwan's Air Force is constantly scrambling fighter jets to intercept Chinese warplanes flying around its borders. And analysts say that Taiwan's struggle to recruit is just part of the problem.
这个不是扩大，比如说我们扩大招收新训飞行员就可以解决的问题。它是一个新的连队，它需要各阶的领导干部，需要一定数量的资深飞行员，然后再加上新进飞行员。所以在未来的几年当中，我们对于那个飞行员的需求会大增。
The military has been trying to address concerns that future graduating classes may not take up as much space on the graduation stage. To recruit more pilots, the Air Force has lowered standards for admission and requirements for eyesight. At the ceremony, Taiwan's president promised to raise the salary for military personnel. But analysts say that the military needs to shake up its strategy and think beyond just numbers. John Su, Sam Hui, and Jaime Ocon for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's top aerospace firm has received more than $96 million worth of orders at this year's Paris Air Show. The Aerospace Industrial Development Corporation, or AIDC, says it will extend its contract with a major European commercial airplane maker for another 6 years. AIDC manufactures civilian and military aircraft and is also tasked with upgrading Taiwan's fleet of F-16s. The biennial air show in France runs until June 26th. It's one of the aviation industry's biggest events. U.S. and South Korean officials are in Washington, D.C. holding talks on cybersecurity cooperation. The talks follow on from South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol's meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden in April. They're also a part of U.S. and South Korean efforts to work more closely together on security. North Korea is stepping up cyber attacks against South Korea and recently failed to launch a spy satellite. Our reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to Rob York, a defense analyst from the Pacific Forum based in Hawaii, about what this could mean for regional cooperation.
What are we seeing in terms of greater cooperation between the U.S. and South Korea?
Yes, Yoon Suk-yeol has really been pushing for closer relations with the United States, and also I'd say really trying to make good on his campaign promise to turn South Korea into the global pivotal state, really lean into this idea of Korea as a middle power. Yoon seems to have a much more global outlook than his predecessor, who was more narrowly focused on resolution of inter-Korean security dilemmas. Since that fizzled, Yoon Suk-yeol has been pursuing security elsewhere, you could say.
South Korea recently released its security strategy earlier this month and highlighted certain threats in the region. Are we going to see more of kind of a push and kind of leaning towards allies and partners to manage the security environment?
Yes, I'd say so. China has definitely been a difficult issue for the Koreans in particular. It's their biggest trading partner, both in terms of imports and exports, so they've always been very hesitant. They also, for a very long time, wanted China to play a very constructive role on the Korean Peninsula and really encourage inter-Korean cooperation. And part of the reason why relations between Korea and China have deteriorated recently is because officials in Seoul have started to realize that China does not share their objectives for the Korean Peninsula, and it is not really interested in pursuing inter-Korean reconciliation. That and economic coercion. Long before Australia, Taiwan, even the U.S. with the trade war with China, South Korea was among the first victims of the PRC's economic coercion.
Going forward, what can we expect from the U.S. and South Korea in trying to prevent any sort of conflict from sparking in that area?
Well, South Korea and the United States are going to continue to really speak as one on this issue and really try to condemn these attacks and also seek to rally international opinion as best as they can against North Korea's provocative nuclear and missile behaviors, and also closely coordinate on how they are going to deter North Korea's recent emphasis on, I guess you could say, asymmetric attacks that are designed to evade missile defense in the region. Regarding cybersecurity, we can expect them to see them put much more attention on those issues and formulate plans on how to counter them.
That was Rob York from the Pacific Forum based in Hawaii speaking to our reporter Jaime Okan. Japan plans to release treated wastewater from a damaged nuclear power plant into the ocean starting next month. The decision has left nations deeply divided. Experts from Taiwan, Australia, and New Zealand have weighed in. Harrell Hughes reports.
This is not regular water. It was used to cool nuclear reactors at the Fukushima Daiichi power plant in Japan. Tsunami waves struck the plant over a decade ago, causing multiple meltdowns. Operators were forced to use seawater to cool the melted fuel, and that process has not stopped since. 12 years later, over 1.3 million tons of nuclear wastewater have been collected, treated, and stored. And more is made daily. Space is running out. Japan proposed 5 options for getting rid of the water: injecting it deep into the earth, discharging it into the sea, releasing it as vapor, reducing it to hydrogen gas, and burying it underground. In the end, they decided to gradually release the water into the Pacific Ocean over the next 4 decades after filtering it through a process known as ALPS.
We always have options to think of what we can do. And I think the release into the ocean is probably, with the dilution and the ALPS processing, is the least bad option.
This is the estimated distance the water will have traveled after 1 year, and after 3.5 years, according to the Atomic Energy Council. But experts point out that debris from a volcanic eruption in Japan arrived at Taiwan's coast in approximately 4 months, much faster than the expected timeline. They say this is due in part to the movement of material that's dissolved or suspended in the ocean's water, a process known as advection.
我倒不觉得一定是小部分哦，因为我们去跑操场的话，那有些比较聪明，他都跑内圈啊，它比较快啊。海洋除了扩散，还有平流向，流动的会比扩散来得快。
Japan says the water is safe. It's been diluted with enough seawater to neutralize the radioactive chemical tritium. They've had scientists study it for years. One professor says contamination levels are lower than the standards set by the World Health Organization.
We are talking much less that is allowed in drinking water around the world. Would I eat the fish? Yes, I would.
But not all are on the same page about the water's safety. An association of more than 100 organizations from the U.S. opposed the plan because of a lack of data. The Pacific Islands Forum agreed. South Korea's opposition leader says if Japan is so convinced that the water is safe, it should use it as drinking water. But one thing is certain. As Japan prepares to begin the operation, the world's experts will be watching closely. Howard Jung and Harrell Hughes for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up, the former Chief Justice of Taiwan's disciplinary court denies allegations of sexual harassment. Stay tuned.
more stories from Taiwan and around the world, download the TaiwanPlus app and follow us on social media.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. A long-running youth activity center in northern Taiwan is set to close its doors for good. Eric Tai explains why the site has proven controversial over the years and how the area could be used in the future.
A final salute to the Republic of China flag at the Jingsan Youth Activity Center. Its operators have announced it will soon be permanently closed. The venue, located in New Taipei's Jingsan district, is a divisive place in Taiwan. For many, it holds fond childhood memories, hosting student outings, outdoor courses, and team-building activities. But for others, the center is a reminder of a dark time in Taiwan's history. It was set up under the Kuomintang, or KMT, government during the country's period of authoritarian rule known as the White Terror. A committee set up to investigate the KMT's assets says that the organization received a large amount of money and support from the one-party state. It says that if the center were to stay open, it would have to pay additional rent.
压倒骆驼的最后一根稻草就是我们诉讼输了，还要再付房租，所以在这双重的条件之下，我们金山的绩效一直都很不好，我们就提早结束。
Jingsan is operated by the China Youth Corps, an organization originally set up under Taiwan's Defense Ministry in 1952 as a military training camp for young people. But over the years, it slowly moved towards hosting recreational activities. In 1989, it was removed from the government control and registered as a nonprofit. The activity center's site covers 28 hectares. The area has also become a tourist location. Following the announcement of the closure, locals say they hope the land will be put to good use. But this might be easier said than done.
在土地里面呢，它有市府的财产，它也有中央的财产。那这样的一块地，它的产权这么的复杂，对于我们新北市市民来讲呢，这块土地呢，未来的开发其实是受阻碍的。
The center will stay open until June 30th. Before it closes, the organizers have invited all those who have enjoyed it over the years to come back for a final visit. Devin Tai and Eric Tai for TaiwanPlus.
Another kindergarten in Taiwan has been accused of drugging children, this time in the northeastern county of Yilan. At least 2 children at the school have tested positive for Ritalin. That's a brand of medication used to treat attention disorders. It's a restricted drug in Taiwan and can only be prescribed by doctors. The school has been ordered to stop recruiting new students, and investigators are looking into where the Ritalin came from. The school says it had parental consent to administer the drug, but the head of the local health bureau suggests the school was testing it out on the kids without medical approval.
给一些他认为可能是有注意力不集中孩子使用，希望如果有改善，他就会劝家属说赶快去看医生做进一步的检查。当然，他的动念你不能说他不对。 但是这个做法是错误的，绝对是错误。
Taiwan's opposition parties are unhappy about the government's picks for the new justices to the country's constitutional court. Bing Wang finds out why.
The future of Taiwan's highest court is at stake today here at the legislature, where Taiwan's 2 main opposition parties are both going to vote for court nominees. Then all 15 justices will have been picked by Tsai Ing-wen under the Democratic Progressive Party.
蔡彩珍同意。
蔡彩珍同意。
朱富美同意。
朱富美同意。
陈忠武同意。
陈忠武同意。
游伯祥同意。
游伯祥同意。
After counting all the votes, all 4 nominees passed and will become part of the highest court in Taiwan.
决议：蔡彩珍、朱富美、陈忠武、游伯祥4位均获得超过全体立法委员1/2之同意票。
Many issues are at stake: indigenous issues, migrant workers, and even the death penalty. Whoever controls the court could shape Taiwan for years to come, even if the government changes hands at the next election. Annie Shi and Bing Wang in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
The former head of Taiwan's disciplinary court is denying allegations of sexual harassment. A court employee has accused him of sexual misconduct at work. It's the latest public allegation in a series of complaints against high-profile public figures and officials. John Van Trieste has the details.
Politics, the arts, academia, and now the justice system. Former Chief Justice Li Bo-dao is the latest figure in Taiwan to be accused of sexual harassment. Until his retirement a few weeks ago, he headed Taiwan's disciplinary court, the court charged with punishing civil servants for infractions. A court employee says that during his tenure, Li harassed her 3 times. She says her superiors ignored her complaints, something the judicial branch denies.
司法院并没有收到被害人的相关申诉，所以无所谓明知并且还让他退休的事情。
Taiwan's judicial branch says it's investigating Li and will punish him if they find that the allegations are true. On Wednesday, his accuser filed a formal complaint, joining a wave of people who've recently come forward with their own stories of harassment. Women's rights activists say they expect more cases to come to light as more people in power are held accountable for their actions.
这些加害者他会持续的，就是告诉你说，我身边可能有什么样的达官贵人或重要的人士，我可以让你在某个圈子里面没有办法混下去。你其实是势单力薄，你要去对抗整个所谓的职场。
But while more victims are finding the courage to come forward and speak out, it's yet to be seen whether this will lead to zero tolerance of harassment and sexual misconduct in the workplace. James Lin and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
A jury in the U.S. has convicted a private investigator of acting as an illegal agent for the Chinese government. Prosecutors said Michael McMahon intimidated a former Chinese official living in New Jersey to try to get him to go back to China to face corruption charges. McMahon, a former New York police sergeant, was convicted along with 2 Chinese citizens living in the U.S. They'll be sentenced at a later date. The trial was the first in a series of U.S. prosecutions linked to China's Operation Fox Hunt. Beijing says the operation is about tracking down fugitives, including corrupt officials. The U.S. sees it as a way for China to harass and threaten critics living overseas. Tesla CEO Elon Musk says India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi pushed for him to make a significant investment in the country. The two met in New York on Tuesday during Modi's state visit to the U.S. Musk says that an announcement about his India investment plans would be made soon, but did not provide any details. Last month, Tesla executives held talks with the Indian government on setting up a manufacturing base for cars and batteries. The electric car maker shelved its plans to enter the Indian market last year because of the country's high import taxes. Wednesday is International Yoga Day. Our reporter Suvam Pal went to an event in Taipei to find out more about how this Indian tradition is still so widely practiced today.
A sea of people in white performing Surya Namaskar, a combination of yoga poses with rhythmic breathing and sun salutations. This group of more than 100 is being led by Ginny Malika Chen at Taipei's Liberty Square to mark International Yoga Day. Her journey with the ancient Indian practice started 35 years ago.
At the beginning, I played the role as interpreter on the stage to translate all the speeches from the master to all the students.
She says yoga transformed her life, sending her on a new career path and giving her a new name.
Malika means adjustment, the white flower. My guru, Sri Swami Satchidananda, he said to take the pure and the white of everything inside you.
The Taiwanese yoga guru talks about understanding one's inner self. But these days, the 1,000-year-old practice has gone beyond the realm of spiritualism to enter the domain of diplomacy.
Yoga has been one of India's most prominent cultural exports for decades. But since Narendra Modi became the Prime Minister of India in 2014, his government has been campaigning and promoting yoga as part of its soft power push.
The day was marked by the de facto Indian mission in Taiwan as well. Taipei and Delhi do not have official diplomatic ties, But with its widespread participation in yoga, Taiwan has joined one of the world's biggest movements and opened another avenue for exchanges with India.
The International Yoga Day has been celebrated now for 9 years, but thanks to the pandemic, in the last 3 years, we have not been able to hold this in this scale or at an open space. But luckily, this year we were fortunate to bring everyone together and to do it in a appropriate scale.
Beginners also tried their hands at the practice. For film producer Ivy Shen, it was an opportunity to try a few poses while promoting her Indian movie, which will be released in Taiwan at the end of July.
Because I'm not a yoga person in regular life, so for me it's quite a surprise that I enjoy a lot.
The theme of International Yoga Day this year is One Earth, One Family, One Future. At a time when Taiwan is diplomatically isolated from much of the world, it has given the country an opportunity to strike a pose on the international stage. Suing Ling and Suvam Pal for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Remember to download the TaiwanPlus app for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, today we leave you with images of an annual chariot festival in India's town of Puri. I'm Leslie Liao. Take care and see you next time.